This is the Drake Insights Podcast, your weekly dose of cutting-edge senior living marketing insights. Join me, your host, Natasha Drake, for bold ideas, proven strategies, and inspiring stories straight from the experts. Tune in and let's conquer the senior living marketing landscape together. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Drake Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Natasha Drake from Drake Strategic. Let's get started. So on today's episode, I am joined by none other than Tripp Higgins. I am sure you've seen him, you've met him at conferences. He's spoken at your community about financial qualifications and really awesome, cool MyLifeSite website interactive tools. So he's joining us today to talk a little bit more about not just MoneyGauge and some of the financial calculator tools that MyLifeSite has that helps increase conversions, but we're going to dig in a little bit about data and analytics in general, and just sort of, are we using the data to its full extent? Are we really analyzing that data? And are we using it to be more efficient and effective with our sales, marketing, and ops tools? So if you don't know Tripp Higgins, he is the president of MyLifeSite, over 15 years experience in senior living sales and marketing. And so he's a lot like me. We have a lot in common in that you started on the community side of senior living and sort of shifted over, similar to me. So we do have a lot in common in that space. So would you mind, Tripp, introducing yourself to those that don't know you or about you today?
Well, thank you, Natasha. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, we do tend to have long conversations because we have so much in common. But I did start in senior living in 2009 and spent the better part of 10 years helping a community outside of Buffalo, New York. That when I did start, it was at 60% occupancy. And I just thought that Ziegler and the Bank of New York and Fitch visited you every month. But yeah, I realized quickly that's not the case. Yeah, and fortunately enough, was able to bring them back and into the high 90s with a wait list. And just recently now they're starting an expansion. So things are good. And I parlayed that into coming back into the senior living world on now the B2B side, where I have tools that do help educate the consumer, educate the salesperson, and make the sales process a bit easier. I always talked about the barriers that we put in front of the prospect and where we wanted to get them. And I'm all about removing those and making it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and we've had many conversations. This podcast has been long coming. And that's where we agree on. You know, I think a lot of times, at least when I was doing sales, and you can probably relate, we didn't have these tools. And I was kind of forced to have to, as a salesperson, to build that relationship, that trust, to understand the product, understand real estate, understand target audience and marketing and events, and then also sometimes being that financial, advisor at many times. And it's, we're asking a lot of these salespeople to be experts in all these things. And so, we're not here today. This isn't a sales conversation. This isn't, okay, use MoneyGauge. This is truly to help open, I think, the eyes of and the ears of a lot of the listeners today of maybe thinking about this differently and how this can help them, not just from a conversion tool, and how, all of these interactive tools, I think sometimes people might think they're gimmicky or, we don't need that. We can just, our salespeople can close that. And this is to just be another tool in their toolbox to be able to have better relationships with their prospects and help with those conversions. So can you talk a little bit, just to kick off though, to start people that haven't heard of MyLifeSite, MoneyGauge tool, can you kind of give a little bit of background of, what they are and how they work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, MyLifeSite was started as an educational resource for prospects. So we have a pretty popular blog that posts every week, as well as a whole resource library that communities can use to help educate that consumer, as well as our website that a lot of prospects come, hundreds of thousands, to try to start their journey. Yeah, we help them gain a little more focus as to questions they should ask and what they should be looking for. At the same time, we did find that everybody had a financial question, and that became one of the biggest barriers. And certainly, studying a little bit of psychology, our subconscious brain is the one that makes 99% of our decisions every day. And when they see pricing, sometimes they're immediately like, I can't afford that. And that financial hesitancy is a real killer. So we developed two tools. One of our financial calculator that allows to create lots of different scenarios one-on-one with a prospect. And then MoneyGauge, which is a front-facing tool that can sit on a community's website or be texted, emailed, sit in a QR code. And it's all about engagement and finding that way to, break through that subconscious brain and get to the conscious brain that wants to learn and almost get to that self-actualization stage. Let's get past that fear of sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs of you need food, shelter, and safety. Well, once we figure that out with we can afford it, now we can start to talk about how we're going to be living, celebrating, enjoying life at that community. And that's more the fun side of sales. Yeah.
Right. And to clarify a little bit, and I didn't realize this as much in the beginning. So there's two pieces to it. One, that it's a tool for the salesperson to use in person with your prospect, which is great. It's a way to bring them in.
Yeah.
I have this great financial tool, get them to come in the door and work with you. But then the MoneyGauge tool specifically is online. And, I think what's great about that, because I've brought this up almost every podcast so far this year, talking about boomers, talking about the generation that wants sort of that self-sales, selective sales. Online today, we can buy whatever we want online. We can get all the information online. We don't have to speak to someone. I know we want relationship. I know we want them to meet with a salesperson, but how can we give them what they want? They want transparency. They want authenticity. They want to be able to say they think they know their financials best, even though we know they don't really understand what that means. And so I think we just have to think differently about this tool and the MoneyGauge tool. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that works? So basically a prospect can go on, it's interactive, they answer questions, and it basically can tell them, I'll let you dig into more.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the tool specifically.
This is great. No, you're selling me on it. How do I buy? This is great. So we try to make it as simple as possible, right? We talked about different barriers. Yeah. So this is anywhere from 7 to 8 to maybe 9 questions. We concentrate on age because we do connect that to life tables in the back end. We then ask for primary assets, so home value, and then a lump sum of their cash savings investments. And most people right there go, well, no one's going to share that. Like, well, interesting enough, we're projecting to have close to 230,000 people share that information just this year alone.
Wow.
So it is something people are pretty eager to try to share because there's some reciprocity. So we go through that, and then we ask them about their Social Security. And then we ask them whether or not they have pension, is there other income, and then we can even tie long-term care insurance to it. Those numbers are then run against 4 primary residential options, from smallest apartment to smallest largest apartment, which essentially casts the widest net of, who can afford to either pay that entry fee, or if you're not an entry fee model, who can afford the monthly service rate through so many different years of care or time at that community. We then tie it to economic assumptions. So this is a very robust calculation in the back end that looks very simple on the front end. And after answering those few questions, now that prospect then sees a series of gauges that relate to a residential option. And that visual is exceptionally powerful. They now have sort of realized and sort of reframed, oh, I didn't think it was affordable. And we see this with a lot of tools. So people will figure like, oh, I'm, eligible for independent living. This is my best spot, but, I can't afford it. Well, MoneyGauge helps give them that data and self-actualization. Like, oh, I can. And that leads to more appointments set.
Right.
And then on the sales side, they now get to understand what apartments they can afford and what that financial viability looks like. And that is powerful because now we know where to start the tour. We know the conversations instead of, let's give you the broad tour and, you've got your oxygen tanks along with you because it's an hour long and they're walking and they probably haven't walked that long in a long time. So we kind of exhaust them. And by that time, their oxygen, pulse ox is pretty low and they can't remember anything that they just saw. Yeah. So MoneyGauge helps you really focus. Yeah. And the salesperson loves it because now they're working with self-qualified prospects that have taken the time, put those numbers in, and there's a level of confidence that salesperson has now, as well as that prospect of, okay, we've got a real conversation and this isn't just, saying hello and figuring out, well, it was nice seeing you and, move on.
Yeah. And 2 things I wanted to mention as you're talking about this is one, I want you to talk a little bit about this. Most people think they can't. The quote I think you said is most people think they live free. at home. I wrote that down the last time we spoke because I think that's so true. Like, I don't have any, yeah, this is high. I'm not paying that. And they start to realize, we have a lot of those cost comparison tools, but this is better than that, is it helps them really realize what are they spending their money on at home, and how that relates to then, spending money there. So that's number one, to relate to what you're saying. So they really don't think they can afford it. They don't realize what they're spending at home.
We find that, upwards of 50% of the people that are taking a MoneyGauge assessment are not in a community's primary market area or not in their CRM, which is fascinating. And then we are starting to see how many people are outside of their primary market area, and how demographics has sometimes changed over time, where historically they've always been marketing to the same zip code area, and that we find, hey, you know what, there's a pocket here that seems to be pretty strong. Have we ever sent anything here? Or what's the latest lead list? And where have you sent your last mailers? Or MoneyGauge can start to help add, a little bit more data to why we're sending it there and why we're making this purchase and this direct mail.
Yeah. And I was gonna talk more about that because obviously that's where I come in from the marketing end. It's funny. So I'm literally in the process of this right now, of setting that target audience list, right, for a client of mine. And it's so funny. I always start with them. We partner and we figure out what they believe the parameters are. And it every time it's the same. Then they put the income level high. They put the zip codes in those high end areas. They put, right. And I start there and they say, well, these zip codes, no one would move here. And when I start to pull, I do all the analysis, market study, market data, you can pull your MoneyGauge data and use that data. So that's one of the things where I think most communities and operators aren't fully utilizing the data. You have that information from MoneyGauge. So you can see that on average, how many are actually qualifying. You will find it's actually lower than you think and you realize. And I think that's or even just to start there, these seniors, the income levels sometimes that we're putting, it's like, how much income do you think they're really making, on pensions and Social Security?
Right.
We have to think about, what are they spending at home? Where's their money coming from? Their assets, their net worth, all those things. So that is a great thing. I mean, when you were telling me about that back end data, I'm like, that would really help us each year analyze our target audience, expand our list to areas and pockets where we may not think of or may not think they can afford. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is I can hear some of the salespeople or operators in my head going, great. So now these people are going to opt out on my website and then I'm not going to get that lead. That's great. When we talked, I think I mentioned that. I brought that up and you were like, what's great is you can set that. So you can set that bar. So you can decide if you want everyone to qualify. We don't, of course, that's up to you and how you want to handle that.
Right.
But you can set it, right, like tighter, what it has to come out to and whether it shows that they may qualify or they definitely will qualify, because then they come in and then you can have that conversation with them and decide that later. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that I hear pushback from a little bit. And it's good to know that it's truly customizable to how you want to use it.
It is amazing. And I always tell, MoneyGauge is agnostic. So it doesn't necessarily care whether you're entry fee or not, or rental. And you can set what I call that financial risk tolerance of what do you look at as a qualified prospect or what is not a qualified prospect. So we have, within the life tables, we can adjust those. We can adjust economic assumptions. We can adjust years of care or delete that altogether. But then we have one other level where we can, say, well, if they have $1 left at the end of 7 years, we're going to say yes. Or if they have negative $250,000 at the end of 7 years, we're going to say yes, or their lifetime. So the flexibility of the system is truly remarkable. And it's one of the things that I concentrated on when I first got to MyLifeSite was, how do we create the flexibility so that we are relevant to any community, regardless of whether you're IL or AL, or in many cases, we're seeing some growth in the health center AL, memory care units to help people understand affordability before there are events, before you've exhausted the family and had something happen that then forces you to make a decision.
Because we have to help educate that adult child, and the spouse who frankly is caregiving, doesn't understand the expense that this is. Like, whoa, that is an amount that they can't fathom or understand. And so these tools or just helping them make a decision and say yes, and making them feel confident in that decision, make them feel in control of this decision, right? Because the biggest thing right now is resisting change and wanting to feel in control and choice in that decision. I just feel like this gives them that control. I'm just thinking me. It makes me feel like I am doing the financial qualifications. I'm the one deciding and looking at the information. And then it's also educating me,
Yep.
in return on what all that means. So let's dig in a little bit, if we can, Trip, to the
Yeah.
data. I wanna share a little bit. I know when we talked, I don't know if you have it in front of you or if I'm putting you on the spot, but let's dig in a little bit to, your metrics that you shared with me in terms of conversion rate, approval rates, what you guys have seen. Because I think that's pretty impactful for listeners to hear.
Yes. No, it is. And I said a little bit earlier that we're projected to have closer to 230,000 assessments so far this year. And what we're seeing is we're averaging now 33% conversion. And when I say that, I'm referring that to what we can control. So we can control an assessment that comes in, and then who gives their name, phone number, and in many cases, 80% of the time, their first name, last name, email, and now phone number and zip code. We can make them, either all required or not, but we are seeing a 33% conversion rate. Yeah. So,
Wow.
for every 100 assessments, you're getting 33 names. And of that, we're seeing on average 56% approvals. Yeah.
Wow.
So what we are doing too is we're giving the most qualified prospects, the financially qualified prospects, to your salespeople. Start their day there. Yeah. And the numbers, we're looking at anywhere from 70 to 125 to sometimes more assessments per month. We have one community now that so far year to date has over 4,200 assessments.
Wow.
Now with a 30% conversion rate and an 80% approval rate. So they are looking at over 1,000 qualified prospects that opted in, gave that information, and now realize that this is an option. And that power is amazing. Yeah.
And I think you said one of the communities had like over 80 something percent approval rate percentage or something like this. You have some that have, really, depending on the pockets or the markets, who are even higher than that average. That's incredible.
And we have some that are low. And in some cases we find, well, MoneyGauge isn't working. I'm like, well, we're getting a lot of assessments. We're getting a high percentage of prospects. Now, if those prospects can't afford it, use that knowledge that MoneyGauge isn't working. Actually, it is working. Let's refine and understand, are we marketing to the wrong zip codes, or has our primary market changed? How do we then find those pockets of people that can afford it?
So that takes me to my third way that this data and analytics can be used outside of marketing and sales, which we talked about. Sales tool, marketing target audience focus. Third is operations. I think when they do pricing assessments each year, trying to figure out rates, it just keeps going up and up and up. And especially if you're targeting the right audience and no one is qualifying, it's a tool now for your operations team to be able to look at, maybe we're outpricing ourselves in this market. Maybe we do need to expand to a new area, or maybe we need to really look at what we're offering in the pricing we have compared to our competitors in this market. So I think that's really neat. It's not just sales and marketing tool. I mean, truly from a financial perspective, operators can use this for their pricing assessments too.
Absolutely. And I'm a big proponent of that, because certainly using an Excel spreadsheet just to add, percentage points to a monthly service rate to an entry fee, hurts the salespeople. They're always like, okay, now go sell this. And you're like, you just made it that much harder. Now you've tied, both our arms and one of our legs together. So we're, really kind of hamstrung. Yeah. So it does offer a lot of visibility. Many times if I go to a community and their occupancy is struggling, I can usually see that by what their rental rates are, what their entry fee is, because they've outpaced what the median market is showing in the data, which equates directly to the salesperson's frustration of, we can't find any financially qualified leads. Everybody doesn't think they can afford it. Yeah. So there's a lot
well,
from the data.
And I would say, if that ever came up in a lot of the marketing planning and marketing assessments I do, if that comes up, this is a great tool to dig into that. I mean, outside of the market studies and feasibility and things like that you can do, this is another great way. Because a lot of times we'll say, well, let's pull the data that the salespeople have put into the CRM, right, of those financial qualifications. Well, how are they getting them? Is it just quickly over a phone call? Like, this is truly giving you that information to be able to look at that and study the financials. And I did want to point to back what you were saying about the data and conversions rates, just personally, because people have asked me for if I've used it, what I recommend. So I have used it for a lot of life plan specific communities. So I don't want to say I've used it everywhere. A lot of our life plan communities that I have overseen. And we have seen, so I do all the marketing data analytics at the end, doing our annual plan, while maybe I think between the chatbot conversions and the MoneyGauge conversions, similar, chatbot may have been higher or so on, but I want to say almost every single community, maybe 9 out of 10, the MoneyGauge conversions were the highest quality conversions. So meaning it may not be the highest number, but it was typically the highest to move in every time. So I would always pull that data. And if you're not pulling that data in your marketing plan, you really should. It's not just website leads, web conversions. It's truly, we have to dig into the conversion points, right? And where are you seeing the most conversion points? And not just that, the quality of those. So you're getting a lot of leads, then are they moving in? Are they touring? So I just wanted to share kind of my feedback of what I've seen, over the past couple of years using at life plan specific communities. It did bring the highest percentage of quality conversions from the website. So that tells you something. I think it's that person that's really on there wants to fill that MoneyGauge out, wants to know their financials. They're serious. They're a serious prospect. And you hear a lot of times these paid leads aren't good leads or these digital leads aren't good leads. Well, they are once they get to your site. And how is your site then functioning to help them convert better, interact more with your site, stay on longer? Those are going to be your higher quality leads. So this just helps with that. Can you dig in a little bit to that too? Because we talked about the best way to leverage the MoneyGauge tool. Like, you have seen best practices of language, where it's placed, things like that, because that has an impact as well, right?
It absolutely does. I mean, we found certainly it's pretty logical, right? There's probably 3 primary places: your homepage, your pricing page, your residential option page. And what we're finding is if people can create a call to action that's relevant to that page and a design that is different enough from everything else on that page, your eyes are designed to go to what's different. It's kind of what helped us survive as a species. And they saw eyes through the bush at the night. They were like, maybe we should pick up camp, or somebody's got to stay up and watch that. That's the same thing with these calls to action. When you can relate it to find out your best fit for our residential options, or take our free financial assessment tool, or our affordability calculator, make your decisions with confidence. It is all about where you put it. Don't hide it. We do have some customers where I'm going, I know they paid for it, but I cannot find it on the website. And it sometimes becomes that afterthought of the digital marketer. We're like, oh, well, we'll put it here. I'm going, but no one gets to the bottom of that page. Let's put it up, make it more relevant, make it more visible, and you will find that people do fill it out, and that quickly becomes your lead aggregator, where you are now finding not just a marketing qualified or sales qualified lead. This is a opted in, financially qualified lead. I'm not sure there's something higher than that, because in many cases, these lead lists you have, the one thing that they all have in common, regardless of where it is in the country, none of those people on that list know that they're age and income qualified. So when they take a MoneyGauge, all of a sudden now they've got a solid foundation to kind of move forward, and the salesperson again has incredible data to now help that prospect get through the first stages of that decision making. And we find that lead time of lead to move in to deposit is much faster when you've started with a MoneyGauge assessment, as opposed to wait to the end of 3 months of working with them, or 6 months, to find out that that apartment they had their heart set on is not affordable, and that you've got to now drop them into the 1-bedroom den that they're.
And I do love, I have a podcast coming out soon about language. I feel very strongly about language in terms of dignity, respect, lots of things. But this specifically, when we talked about this. And I think that's really important. Many times I see take our financial calculator, or, it's very salesy, or use the MoneyGauge tool. People don't know what that means. So I think explaining that's like, I think you gave a couple options or ideas that were like, explore your
with
options with
confidence.
confidence,
Right.
or be in control of your financial future. And I know people think that's salesy. No, that's what people want to hear. They want to see those control, confidence, it's your financials, be in control of it. Right. Because a lot of times when you're trying to buy something, you feel completely out of control
Yeah.
of it. Right. You don't have any control over it. So and I'm going to just say that as a blanket statement in marketing in general, everything you say, your language, it is so important. We really need to look at that in terms of how we're messaging things. And so if you have this tool, or you have other types of interactive tools on your website, your messaging and your marketing and your language, just by making some of those slight tweaks or adjustments or places, like Tripp saying, can help impact. If you're not seeing the results, if you have MoneyGauge, you might need to make some changes to your messaging and where you have it located. And that's in terms of any conversion point interactive
Right.
tool you have on your website. So little marketing advice there on
So
you for your website.
it is
Um,
brilliant, and it's one of the lowest cost pieces you can do to
right.
see and measure change and your ROI is to, oh, we're getting more assessments now that we raised it up and we changed the messaging bit. Yeah.
So is there anything more we want to dig into? I don't want to exhaust it, but is there any more you want to share? I think you went into all this. Who are the best at using it, how they are using it, kind of recap that
Yeah.
section, or did we get
I'll,
through
I'll
everything?
tell a quick story. So a
Okay.
newer community starting out was using MoneyGauge, having difficulty finding financially approved prospects. And they're like,
Hmm.
what is wrong? And we dug in and we looked at all the zip codes and we could group those and kind of understand, okay, let's look at those zip codes and what is their median home value? What is their income? Historically, what has it been? Now, and what I saw a trend of is a lot of homes that were, $800,000 plus, but savings of about 100,000 on average, and income of just Social Security. So if you figure, 2,000 times 12 is, you know, $24,000, but if your monthly service rate is averaging 8,000, people run out of money pretty quickly, even if their home value is at 800. And in many cases, that home value had been sort of gentrified, where this neighborhood is changing a bit. But we really identified and helped them go, gosh, you need to concentrate a little bit, north of the river, that, many cases people don't feel that they would ever want to come down to where they are. But we were able
Right.
to really adjust their marketing spend by truly understanding and seeing, of the that point 1,500 assessments, what were the numbers telling us, and what we could do to affect change. Yeah, and in some cases, some customers have too many financially qualified leads coming in, and they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out a process of how to take care of all of them. Like, well, that's a good problem to have, but yeah, we are being able to identify those zip codes is great. We can even dig into, and this is kind of crazy, as to the time of day most of the assessments are being taken, as to the day that they're
Interesting.
taken. Yeah, and if
Mm-hmm.
some people can absorb that to go, okay, well, how do we use that to better
Mm-hmm.
time our digital spend, to make sure that we're visible and not just pay to
Mm.
be there, but be there when it counts. Yeah, and I would say refining that marketing spend, you can save far more than what MoneyGauge costs. Yeah, just on a monthly basis, you could basically pay for MoneyGauge, I think. Yeah, and
Right.
ultimately move forward with much more refined plan based on the data that you're seeing, and
Yeah.
ultimately we see success that way. Now,
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest. That's the reason why when we've met, we've talked about this. I this is not, and it was sort of similar to I had another podcast with Engreen and sort of how their conversions are, and it's the same kind of thing. This isn't just a conversion tool. We're putting it on to try to get people to whatever it is, downloadable content. I want the listeners to think differently about this and this type of tool, and I hope that what Tripp is sharing is impactful, because it was to me when we spoke. Like, I hadn't even thought about a lot of these things and how we use that data. And so in general, I want to recap some of this that we've talked about. So, get a lot of pushback on these types of tools. And like you just said, if you really look at the impact and how this can help you in the long run save money in terms of the amount of move-ins you're getting it and efficiency in general, and then pricing conversations and all of that. I want to talk a little bit just to recap. So Number one, we said great for boomers, self-selective sales, things like that, transparency, authenticity, increased conversions.
All
Clearly that's clear. But, we talked about, and I'll let you recap what you just said, sort of in terms of sales marketing operations and how, just want to make sure everyone hears how that's going to help you. The data is going to help you from the back end.
Yes. I mean, the data you're collecting obviously helps you refine your digital spend. And I think one of the bigger advantages is your salespeople now can sort of save their energy and focus it on the most qualified leads. Yeah, and sort of rev their engine up to then be able to work with maybe the ones that didn't come across as qualified, but maybe have a son or daughter that's going to, help them out. So the data that comes through is more than enough for a salesperson and a community to be very successful. Yeah, but then digging a little bit deeper, you can truly understand a little bit more of that DNA of your primary market area, and help sort of future plan there. In many cases,
Yeah.
we could then identify which apartments tend to be, the most affordable
Yeah.
within your primary market area, so that if you are looking at expansions, maybe we concentrate on that one bedroom den as opposed to putting too many two bedrooms that are priced out of, what we find is the
Yeah.
largest pocket of opportunity. Yeah.
Right. I didn't even think of
There's
that.
layers and layers and layers that can be refined and go, oh, how do we work through this? Or to our benchmarking data across the country, being able to, where is the best place to possibly expand, and truly understand where that
Yeah.
$150 million community needs to go next. Yeah.
Right. Especially these large operators that use this tool, like you're saying, across the country. I know a number of them that use it, in all different states, to be able to analyze all that data in terms of financial. Yeah. What age, obviously, is it adult children? What pockets have those? Yeah. What are those income qualifications in each area? That's really interesting, especially like you said, I didn't think about that for expansions and building new. If a whole area is only qualifying for the one bedrooms, they only want the one bedrooms. Now I know I have seen it depends on the market. Many are like, it's all the 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 2-bedroom dens, or it's more of the studios and 1 bedrooms, depending on where it's located. This can help you get that information, not just from your CRM. A lot of times we're pulling things from the CRM that's the salesperson's putting in. I'm not disqualifying that information, but think about this. This is information your prospect
Right.
is putting in and getting straight from them to start that sales dialogue. You come with it with your chatbot info and your financial calculator info all ready to initiate that conversation with the prospect. So it's just incredible. I think, and even just here on this conversation, I'm finding out more and more ways you can use it. And I want to just reiterate that to the listeners is that in general, I think we as an industry and as a whole I think I have data. We're using less than a quarter of the data that we actually have truly to analyze and make wise decisions and save dollars. We're really just behind on that in the industry. And so we need to get behind how we're using not just AI, but these online tools that all this information you're gathering, whether it be from paid digital advertising, but then also specifically for these engagement tools on your website. We need to be using these to make better, wise decisions to save money in the long run. And they have the data. We have it on the back end. Let's use it. Let's analyze it. Let's make better decisions. I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah.
That's why you and I think every time we talk, we're like, yes, everyone should be doing this. It's so important, especially with this boomer generation. So
Right.
thank you so much for coming on and, sharing all this information. I think a lot of people don't know the depth of truly how this tool can help them, outside of being a website tool. I want to leave it with you, any other, besides what I just did, kind of took as you can see, obviously I'm a big advocate for using these types of tools, ending tips that you want to leave, key points for the listeners today.
Well, we're all about helping people help people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, with my experience and background, with the tools we have now to be able to engage with communities and help them better engage with their prospects, it truly gets down to, look, let's help people help people. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. And our tools are much more than just something that sits on your website. The data that is collected and the percentages of people that fill it out are much larger than anybody anticipated, and that we're finding we can add so much more value. And senior living is almost like a whitewater rafting trip. You're always in a class 4 rapid. You never have a break, right? So we try to find that eddy, and hopefully we can be a little bit of that eddy where it's the calm water on the side where we can start to make better
Yeah.
decisions and have a plan as to how we're going to hit the next quarter or, next rapid, if I could use that
Yeah.
analogy, where we
I love it.
try to slow it
That's
down and go,
great.
okay, how are we going to attack it? Because we all don't want to fall out of the boat again. So let's.
Well, and I think a lot of times, yeah, I mean, sales and marketing can be like, what is this tool? What is Natasha bringing on now? And it truly is, I feel the same way. Everything that I'm trying to do is not to just to generate leads. It's as a salesperson at heart, where I started too. I want to make your lives easier. I want to bring you the right qualified leads, and I want to give you the data on the back end to help you do it. So I totally agree. Any way we can help each other, at least from a sales perspective, and then also from a marketing data perspective, makes my life easier. So anyway, thank you so much,
Oh,
Tripp, for
this is
for
great.
being on, joining the podcast today. And thank you all for watching another episode of the Drake Insights podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye. Real quick, if you enjoyed watching the podcast today, please follow me and subscribe so you're notified for the next podcast. And if you have any questions or want to talk after about anything that Drake Strategic can provide for you, please reach out to me, call me, email me, or visit our website at drakestrategic.com.